Welcome to the Wednesday LiveStream from Dulcimer Crossing. Dulcimer Crossing is the location that Linda Ratcliffe and I put together about a dozen years ago, and we've been going strong for 11 years to provide lessons for you at your time frame and your convenience to play both kinds of dulcimers. We've added dulcibro and baritone dulcimers and chromatic mountain dulcimers and fiddle as well. And we are excited to be sponsors of the Quarantune Dulcimer Festival, which is taking place this week. And one of the first things I want to do is make sure, let's go here, and now okay. Facebook changed some things. I got to get there first. And let's change. I want to do that one. It's taking a minute, folks. Oops, no, I want to join. Here we go. I want to... Nope, that's not it. This should not be this difficult. So we're going to delete you. Delete that post. There we go. If you're saying you want tartar sauce on your bass, apparently I can't add what I want to add here. So let me do this. No, that's not it. We have a vending space on Thursday afternoon, 2 to 4 Mountain Time. And you can do the conversions to your own time zone, but this is our space for the vending. It's a different link than if you've saved one from earlier. There's been a Zoom issue that I'm currently going to spend the morning resolving that we discovered last night. But this one should be the good one. So I'll be there to give you a chance to go through the site to look over my shoulder. We'll also have some special coupons. If you have never been part of Dulcimer Crossing before and want to give us a tryout, this will be the perfect time to do that. So Dulcimer Crossing sponsors this live stream. We're also proud to sponsor this event, and we provide for monthly workshops and support for students who are working on learning both kinds of dulcimers. Now, today, our theme, all about the bass. I want to talk about bass first on a standard instrument because, and I'm going to change on a standard dulcimer, the string that's thickest and furthest away from us is called the bass string. And it's because it plays the lowest notes. Good. And in drone style, in the time before there were frets that went all the way across the fretboard, the only place to change the notes was on the melody string. And so the bass note was a drone, a bass drone. And it wouldn't change But when frets got put all the way across the fretboard, that started like in the 40s and 50s. I think it became more popular in the 60s. Some people let the frets go across on only some of the places, like at 0 and 3 and 4, and had frets all along under the melody string like had been traditional before. But eventually it became the practice that frets would go all the way across, which means it's possible to play all the notes that you would play on any other of the other strings. You could change them as you used your fingers on the bass strings on the mountain dulcimer. That wasn't the old traditional way, but it is possible now. And one of the things I just want to call attention to is when you're playing an instrument tuned to D, A, and D, the uppercase D, the uppercase A because they're in the first octave, lowercase d because it's an octave higher, so that you know which one you're tuning to. Everything I would do here on music that tells me to do this, I could do the same thing on the bass string. So I can take my one piece of music, and by playing on the bass string, I can play the same song. And I could play it in individual strings, or I could drone it. Now, what is this note? It is a note that is lower than the violin. The violin's lowest note is the same as the third fret on the bass string, the G there. That's also the lowest string on a mandolin. The D string on a mountain dulcimer, however, is like the D string on a guitar. So if you ever break your bass string and you're with a guitar player, say, can I have your D string, please? Can I get a donation of a D string? Because that's the gauge of string that can work here, because that's the pitch we're singing and playing. Here's a question for differentiating different octaves. There has not been a standard yet, Doug. I'm advocating for the upper and lower case on this instrument. Some people use prime, the foot sign, and inches sign. I've seen that less. Pluses and asterisks usually have to do with half frets. So asterisks usually mean pay attention to this because it's going to be different than you expect. Which is standard English usage also. Pluses usually mean half frets. So that's why I'm using the lowercase d for the higher D. If this was a C, which would be in that first octave, it'd be an uppercase C. If this was an A, it'd be an uppercase A. If it was a G, it'd be an uppercase G because it's all in that first octave. But when we walk up the scale, those are all uppercase. Then we're in a new octave now. And that demonstrates that we have on the bass string one octave. This is the first octave. Now we're in the second octave. Now we're in the third octave. And if we have some notes above that, we might get up to the fa above that, the G above that. So if I can take everything that was written for the melody string, play it on the bass string, and I've already got two different ways to play it, two different octaves or registers to play. And the thing I do differently when I'm playing on the bass string is angle my pick just a little bit. So when I'm playing on the melody string, I tend to angle up slightly so that I hear the melody string, which is the moving string, a little louder than the drone strings. When I'm playing on the bass string, and that's where my melody is, I tend to angle down just a little bit so that I get, while I have drones that are accompanying my melody, I hear the melody more clearly. Or I can play single string. And when I'm playing single string, I'm using alternate picking usually. That helps me keep accurate and lets me hover over the string I want to be playing. Now, that being said, this is a standard dulcimer, and the bass string here is the same let's go over to the hammer dulcimer. I got a bunch of hammers sitting on the strings right now because I was showing them to a student. The bass string, the low D here on a hammer dulcimer, is the same pitch as the bass string on a mountain dulcimer. So they're in the same register. The timbre of the sound is a little bit different because this is a doubled string and it's got all these sympathetic vibrations. On the mountain dulcimer, you might not be able to hear it, but I can hear that when I stop the bass string, there's still a D sound ringing because the octave melody strings are vibrating as well. So now let's go to, there are things called bass dulcimers. And this is one. This one is a 4-string. So you can see that's an octave lower. That's a D that's even lower than my regular D. And that's where I will sometimes use prime to indicate the lower one. But that there's nothing standard about that yet. What that means is whatever's on the high D on a bass dulcimer matches identically whatever is the bass string on the standard dulcimer. Now, Richard Ashe at Folkcraft has created his Max Dad instrument, which is like a D, A, D, A, D, which is putting a bass and a standard dulcimer together in this kind of a configuration. You have a 6-string fretboard, but you have all those available to you, and you can pluck and play across your fretboard and get both standard and bass dulcimer at the same time. Now, on a 4-string dulcimer, you have an option of what you want to do here. Janita and Bob Baker at Blue Lion made this one for me. I usually tune D, A, C natural, D, and because this is one of the things I wanted to talk about on a bass dulcimer. Let me retune that to a D. We tend to think about dulcimers as chord instruments. If I take what I would normally play on my standard dulcimer, I could hear clarity in between those. Let me do it to demonstrate. I could hear clarity in those notes differently. When I play that same thing on a bass, the first one sounds pretty clear. Now it's a little muddier. It still works, and I'm going to describe why in a minute. The vibrations of the lower pitches of strings, if you look at their wave on an oscilloscope, you would see that the vibrations are much bigger for a lower pitched string. Higher pitched strings, the vibrations are faster and they're tighter. Lower pitched strings are bigger and slower, which means that if I try to play something that's really close in so this is the G that's the bottom of the bass clef on musical notation. This is the B that is the next space above that G. That's getting kind of muddy because they're so close to each other. Their sound waves bang against each other. And there's a little phasing that happens. This is the F sharp and the A, same thing. Now, when I get up to the B and the D, it's starting to get into a range where I can hear those clearly, and it's only a function of how the pitch and its waves work. So one of the things that we don't do, yes, is play that tight of chords that low. We try to do that in a higher place. So up here, this kind of a melody, when I can, there's a lot of room for that. So the richness of the lower pitches works in one that's an octave higher. But when I try to do that same thing, they just get muddy. So when I'm playing a bass, I'm thinking about playing it differently. I want to just demonstrate this on the hammer dulcimer because it applies there as well. And let's move you guys out of the way. If I have a melody and I want to harmonize it, that sounds, I can hear it, it sounds, but it sounds different than here. So I'm trying in this lower octave here, and this is where many hammer dulcimers stop. Mine goes down and it gets even worse. The pitches work, but the vibrations of the strings are difficult. Now when I take it and do a fifth away, it was wide and then it got tight again. And so things kind of got in the way. So when I'm playing the lower octave, I try to play more spare. I try not to have the octaves so close to each other because it makes it difficult to hear the harmonies. So my first thing when I'm playing the bass is the bass usually stands alone. You know, it's like the cheese stands alone when you're doing that song about the mice and the cheese. So the second thing is, and this, there are people who differ on this. I know Kirk House differs from me on this, and he teaches a lot of bass. So you just got to know that people have different opinions about things, and you can test those and see which one works the best for you. But when I have a bass line, this string is wound nice and thick, and it has a particular timbre to it because of that. When I go to the fourth fret, just like I would on any dulcimer, that pitch matches the A string that's tuned there. That A string is not as thick. So the pitch is there, but the timbre is different. And if I'm playing in an orchestral or an ensemble place with a group of people, and I want to hear that bass, I want to have a bass line, maybe the bass gets the opportunity to sing the melody, everybody else is doing the harmonies above, I'm probably going to play in a very linear fashion because the timbre of the string will stay. I don't want that to sound different just because I moved. I'm not going to pick an easier place to play when I have the choice between, when all I can do is choose between, well, if it's the only way I can do it, I will do it. But for sound, tone, timbre choices, I will stick with timbre over ease of play. I will learn how to play the harder part, or play it in what would be the more challenging way, because I want the timbre to stay the same. What the other thing is, a bass part is usually bump, 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 bump. It's not play and hold. It can be, but if you're playing to back up what other people are doing, it's the attack is more important than the sustain for many styles of music. Not every style of music and not every song, but a lot of us don't think about getting back off the instrument. And when you watch a bass player who's playing an upright bass, you might have seen their hand doing this a lot. What they're doing is they're playing the open string and stopping it. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when it's time for them to play a pitch, so it's not just about playing the string and starting the noise or the sound, it's also about stopping the sound. And that's a new technique that bass players, people playing bass, often don't think of, because these big honking strings plow through everything. If you've ever seen the inside of a piano, the bass strings, there's only one that's about as big as your finger. And as they get a little bit, as they move up through the octaves, they get smaller, and you get 2 paired together. And in the middle place, they get 3 paired together, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller until the top of the piano, there are 4 together. And it takes all 4 of those being struck to match the volume of one of the bass strings being struck. It has to do with mass. And I'm sure there are people who could give you equations. I'm not one of them, nor could I read them and understand them. But I know that there are people who measure things and can mathematically describe why that's the case. What I know is, here's the part I know. Now you could hear in there, I wasn't very clean. We were hearing some buzzing and stuff because I was too far away or I wasn't as close behind. So playing bass really does take technique. And it's not just let's give it to the person who can only play one note. It's person who can play one note and focus on that one note and work on the technique to make it be clean. What I was doing there is the 1-5. I wrote an article for Dulcimer Players News. It's in the archives, about playing bass dulcimer. It was a series of articles. And then the first one, it's the classic joke. How many bass players does it take to change a light bulb? And it's 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5. Because bass players usually play the root and the fifth of whatever the chord is that's being played at the moment. So when I'm doing that, I'm keeping the beat. When you're playing the bass, it's your job to keep the beat and keep it steady, because people can hear that below whatever else is happening. This is the same thing that happens on a hammer dulcimer. When I'm playing my attack is the most important thing, and it's got to be in time. It's got to be on time and in time, because without that, and that's one of the things people like in an ensemble, is somebody who's keeping the time moving forward steadily, not speeding up and slowing down. So the metronome is your friend, like it always is. The other thing is that basses can do that is really helpful. You heard me doing that one. I changed chords, so I was playing a D chord. I was playing the D and the A, which are the 1 and the 5 of the D chord. But then I played an A and an E, so my 1 doesn't necessarily have to be lower than the 5th I choose. I played the E that goes along with that. But I could also, I come from up in Idaho with a bass on my D. That little come from up in Idaho with a bass on my knee. And I'm going out to Facebook, my good friends for to see. Oh, Susanna, now don't you cry for me, for I'm up in coming from Idaho with a good friends for to see. I'm playing not only the ones in the 5, but I'm playing walking notes that help me get there. And when you play the walking bass underneath whatever else is happening, you help telegraph to everybody else what's going to happen. And there is a formula. I use it is I want to land on the 1 at the beginning of the measure. And if I'm going from the 1 chord to the 5 chord, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I have all these steps to get there. So I just use all the beats of the measure. But if I'm going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, in this case it's a G, I don't have as many steps. So I have to wait. I have to hang out 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. When I'm going from 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Or if I hang out 1, 2, 3, 4, then I'll just do the last 2 to get me there. So it's about I'm just playing the steps in between the notes of the roots of the chord, and I'm using the beats in the measure to help me decide when to move. Now that might, oops, I forgot to change my camera. There we go. Okay. So that you can see what I'm doing. So when I'm playing that bass line, I'm underscoring, or I'm undergirding, providing foundation that's both tone and time. And so working on your timing when you want to play the bass is going to be really important. Working on your technique so that what you're doing doesn't overpower everyone else is going to be very important. And you're going to be in a lower range, so you may not hear yourself as clearly as you did before. Now, I mentioned before, I retuned this. If I'm playing a solo thing, now that's not a piece that I know. It's just one I started playing right now because I was inspired by these tones to try that. But I was doing my melody on the melody string and letting the other things support with sometimes adding something. The reason this worked, the F sharp to the B, is that's a sixth. That's a sixth. The F sharp here, and the G to the B, F sharp to the A, and the G to the B. They're a sixth away from each other. There's room for them to play without getting each other's way. And so I think that covers what I wanted to do to emphasize today for All About the Bass. There are workshops at this festival for playing bass dulcimer. The Dulcimer Orchestra has a vending space on Thursday, tomorrow afternoon. And if you'd like to drop in there, you can ask Kirk some questions, because Kirk and Judy House will be there. There are the hosts of that First National Dulcimer Orchestra, and you can talk to him and debate. You could tell him what I said, and we can have a debate. Or you can just ask him, why do you do it the way you do it? What do you do, and why do you do it the way you do it? That's always a good question for people. Because one of the things it does, it's interesting for us to have to know what we're doing and why. And sometimes we just do it and we haven't thought about the why. Yeah, Doug, I think you should do that. I think you have what you need in order to explore intervals across the frets. And the tunings have something to do with that. Oh, the one other thing I was going to say is I started out with this in DAC, just like on a standard at the 6th fret on the bass string. Gives me a C natural. What that lets me do is have have this scale that's got the C, D, E, F natural, G, A, B flat, and there are some pieces that I play in ensemble music where that note is needed in that octave, and so that's why I retune it that way, and that's one of the benefits of having a 4-string instrument, because I have the high D here if I need it, but I also have the C here. So friends, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been All About the Bass at Dulcimer Crossing, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well. This is archived on our Facebook page as well as on the Dulcimer Crossing page, and our YouTube channel and Vimeo, which is where we broadcast from. And one of these days here, I'll be joined by Erin May again. I think she will not be available next week because she'll be at the Black Mountain Festival in North Carolina. And so it will be sometime after that. The exciting thing for us is that we have the workshop of Christian Hewitt from Paris, France, coming up later in the month. And I'll give a plug for that later on. But right now, I want you to have a great time playing your instrument or thinking about the bass parts of your instrument if you haven't done that before. Give a little focus there and see what happens. If you're coming to the Quarantine Festival, have a great time. I look forward to seeing you there. Until next time.